All right, I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast.
I'm Kyle from GoTheFilmMovies.com.
And today we're going to get started with our drumming we're going to critique what? Sound of Metal. Let's go! Okay, I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast.
I'm Kyle from GoTheFilmMovies.com, and we are doing Sound of Metal today. Looking over this film that I don't want to say sleeper hit because it's tough to gauge a sleeper hit nowadays because movies that make it to streaming are all kind of sleeper hits. No one's really talking about them in the way that they are. This one stars Riz Ahmed, who also is a producer on the film. He plays Ruben, who's part of a kind of a two-person punk metal band called Black Gammon. I figured that out on the second watch.
And a very, very unrecognizable Olivia Cook.
Yeah, I almost didn't realize it was her when I first saw her.
Because you watch it like, are you sure? I had to go back in my phone, are you sure this is her?
Heavy makeup or CGI like in Ready Player One. It's just tough to tell. But they play in a band, and then Ruben has an instance while playing where he starts to lose his hearing, which for a drummer is a very, very bad thing to experience. And not only that, but Ruben is also a recovering addict. And his biggest problem there is that the stress of losing his hearing, the stress of trying to save up money for implants, and the stress of trying to avoid taking on drugs is kind of pushing him over the edge.
So we're recording this before Oscars. We know that it's got a couple categories nominated.
It did, yeah.
But we're recording before there's announcements of any awards. So we're recording this before the Oscars, so we don't know if it won any categories yet. But I would say I would be very surprised if it didn't win any technical like sound.
Well, sound is kind of the most interesting element here because people tend to think when you think best sound, you think of war movies, you think of action
explosions,
films, and basically that kind of stuff. It's rare that people acknowledge the sound in a movie about lack of sound.
Yeah.
And I think when Darius Marder, who directed the film, when he chooses to allow there to be sound, and then when he chooses to allow there to be silence, or that kind of like tinnitus kind of level of sound quality that's going through, it's really interesting. It's very effective. It's also kind of tough because when they showed this film in theaters, or not in theaters, but in early screenings and such, they elected to use subtitles as often as possible. Whereas depending on how you watch it at home, sometimes you choose subtitles, sometimes you don't. I watched it the first time on an early screening that didn't have subtitles. The second time I watched it with. So it kind of works in two different ways there because you get more of the conversation pieces with the subtitles.
Well, there's an potential with going into the deafness community. Mm-hmm. So you have to play on that. So a lot of people probably who are deaf will be interested to see the movie. Mm-hmm. And there are some stuff that probably want to have subtitles throughout it. So it's a great option.
Yeah, I would say if you decide to watch it once, I think either way works. But if you watch it a second time, I would try the opposite version of things so that you kind of get a different feeling for it. Because they're two very different ways of viewing the film, two different experiences.
So, like I said, I like the technical stuff of this, and it's not taken away from Riz's performance side, which I think is really deserved to be nominated. It's fantastic acting, and I'll get back to that. But from my small pool of films I saw from last year, this is one of the best edited films I've seen in a long time. It is smooth.
It's a very smooth movie.
And a lot of great choices of where you want to cut that don't seem jagged.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I found the film very jarring. I feel like it's a tough watch. Both times I've watched the movie now, I haven't enjoyed myself.
It's not the feel-good movie of the year, right?
Even at the end, I don't really feel like fulfilled walking away, which is kind of the point. But I also think, for the film to be edited the way that it is, where it just flows really nicely. It was shot in chronological order.
Oh my gosh!
Which means that Olivia Cook was on set for an early portion of the film, then she left for several months. And that's why when we see her again, she actually purposely changed her look so that it does have that weight of time.
And it fits for the movie. All of a sudden, they understand that they can't do this anymore. Mm-hmm. And even when they're performing, it's almost like they can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you have to give it up, which is something like an addiction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think the element of the two characters being kind of addicted to each other as well.
Yeah, there's codependency.
Period. And I think that happens when you live in a van with one other person, and you spend all your time together. I feel like you could probably get that going there. I know during the 2020 pandemic, I'm sure my wife and I garnered more codependency than I expected us to.
But there's little subtleties that I appreciate in this movie that I used to be in a band that I appreciate of people that are rock musicians, especially the culture that they live in. That all of a sudden, especially when you're done with addictions, then all of a sudden you live this very healthy lifestyle. That's not really a healthy lifestyle, but like you exercise in the morning, you eat healthy and all that stuff. But the mannerisms, the way they take care of their equipment is very much, they have a blanket, they take care of the drums and everything.
It's a little obsessive compulsive, but that kind of comes with like building the routine so you don't have that break that causes stress.
Yes. So there's a lot of small care of details of being in a rock band that I appreciated that really shines through.
Yeah. And a lot of that comes from, this film was originally envisioned actually and partially shot as a documentary called Metalhead with Derek Cianfrance and Darius Marder working together on this. That documentary was ultimately abandoned.
Does have a documentary.
And so this kind of film was basically a narrative version of a similar kind of documentary-like style to it. And that's why I think that there's so much detail to the film and that the story does flow pretty smoothly because they were kind of putting it... I mean, I think putting together a documentary is tougher than putting together a narrative feature because you have life to deal with. You have all these different options. And so when you kind of figure out what you want to do, I'm sure that they kind of had an idea for how they wanted that doc to play out.
Yeah.
And they can adapt that to the film pretty interestingly.
Smoothly transition to another. That's like I say, this is a very smoothly made film, even though the content is kind of hard to digest. Let's talk about, because eventually he's losing his hearing, so he's going to have to learn new skills. So he has to go to the deaf community facility. It's not like rehab.
Well, it's kind of like a home, if you will. And it's there for the idea of rehabilitation, maybe not specifically around drugs, but then again, it's run by Paul Raci's character Joe, who was a recovering alcoholic. He's my favorite performance in the movie. No disrespect to anyone else. He's my favorite performance in the movie, though, because I wasn't sure if the actor playing him was deaf or not making the film. And I honestly still don't know. I don't know much about Paul Raci, but when he was able to kind of like get into that role so easily, and you feel like everything kind of worked together on the screen.
It's just authentic role, that Joe.
Yep.
The funny thing is, when I was in my band, my rock band manager looked exactly like that guy. The same age and ponytail, and he's done every drug in the world, and he kind of guarded us too. But a lot of the scenes are played out of him kind of being a father figure to kind of babysitting the band and stuff. So yeah, it's kind of fun. So here what's his character? Ruben.
Yep.
It's a transition. It's all about a transition of you have to give up something and go somewhere new, and it's forcing him, and he has to learn all these new things in life, and he's gonna have to transition to not being a rock band anymore and appreciate that you're going to be deaf.
Well, that's what I liked about Riz Ahmed's performance, because Riz Ahmed has been silently kicking ass for years now.
Yeah.
He was in Nightcrawler, and he was great in Nightcrawler. I really loved him in Rogue One. I never saw his performance in Venom, but like he's been like silently like rocking through all these performances.
Yeah.
This time around, he learned American Sign Language, which I've taken a credit of in college. It's not an easy thing to learn because it is a different language than every other language you've ever been a part of. And then he also had to learn drums and music too. So he basically had to learn Ruben's life in order to take part in the film. And he spent like 8 months learning all these different things. And I think it shines through in his performance because he has a confidence level to every piece that grows. The American Sign Language portion grows, and the drum set feels like it's confident from the get-go, and then it starts to like saunter,
So the overall theme, if you don't want to hear about it, if you haven't seen the movie yet, please stop.
Please pause and
So I think the overall theme of this movie is you have to force and learn yourself to get rid of the loud distractions in your life and find who you really are. I think that, and it's hard, it's going to be uncomfortable, but listen and enjoy the quiet is going to be hard for him.
See, and I took away something slightly different than that, in that I took it away as the film is about, the inevitability of forced change.
Right.
And kind of like, both of them are basically like you have to give up control a little bit, in what you see there. I mean, of course, that very gorgeous, again, we're going to talk spoilers, that very gorgeous last shot of him when he finally takes off those pieces and he just sits there in silence. And he sits there in silence for the first time in the entire movie. Every scene we see him sitting there, when he's in that room with Joe, that Joe gives him, it's writing, it's crushing the donut, it's like getting angry, and he never once even fully commits to the silence and to the peace.
Yeah.
And he gets there in that version. And that's kind of what I finally found is like, that's what I love and hate about the movie so much, is that it's tough to think about losing the one thing drives your passion in life.
No,
You know, it breaks my heart. Like, I think I watch movies and I read, like, to lose sight can still kind of can impact that. Of course, there are ways to get around it, but like you never really get back to the way that it was before. And that's kind of what he's experiencing with his ear.
It's kind of I kind of a little bit relate because when our band broke up, then you're like, what I got to do with my life? And I went back to starting writing again, and it was hard because you're so used to the chaos of being around members and booking shows and it's loud, and then you sit in quiet, and it's almost a violent act.
Yeah,
we talk about movies that sometimes silence can be violence, and here silence can be a force, right? You're gonna have to accept that you have to calm yourself down and take in a little bit of reality rather than just amplify everything. Right? He doesn't sit still throughout the whole movie.
No. And I can understand it. Like, part of it is that you're angry at him because you want him to take the lessons he's being given, but you also know that by taking those lessons, he's going to have to give up everything he cares about. And we all know that being left ambiguous, I took away that, eventually he is going to find some peace in something.
We don't really know for sure, right?
We don't really know.
I like that ending. We don't know.
Spinning.
But he's attempting. That's the first time in his life he's going to attempt the quiet. Right?
Yeah.
He's going to enjoy the quiet. Like we talk about in films, is always searching for is either a transition or searching for your authentic self. And maybe he hasn't really discovered his authentic self yet, but he's definitely going through a transition. Mm-hmm. Sound of Metal is also a play on the term of getting your cochlear implant, because it does sound like you're going into a metal. You're bypassing everything. So they always tell you, and I never heard, but I've heard from my father-in-law said it sounds like metallic robotic voices when you. And it plays great in the movie.
And that's something I didn't know enough about. I don't know anybody who's wanted to talk about that and let me learn that. So for me, that was like a twist in the movie where, like, when I finally heard the implant go in and I finally heard what it was, I realized, like, there's no fixing his music life in the way that he wants it to be.
Never coming back.
It's never coming back in that way. And I think that's what hurt me so much. Yeah. Like, it really affected me. Of course, like, there's the options of, like, he uses his music in a way of, like, teaching at the school when he finally, he finally gains his confidence in that world. And I like that he uses it, and then he also feels the vibrations. Like, that scene on the slide was a great scene.
It's a metal slide.
He's using his musician qualities to share a moment with someone he doesn't really know.
Yeah, when I was in a band, we always said we were just playing well choreographed and in sync vibrations.
Yeah.
All instruments is just a vibration, sounds of vibrations. So yeah, in fact, drumming is probably the most one that you can feel drums more than you can sometimes appreciate and hear them. You can actually feel them.
Yeah.
But yes, it's overall Sound of Metal, but also the cochlear implant there's a slight delay in the when you get one.
Yeah.
And also it searches the conversation that you want. So when you're in a party, and I heard people that have implants, they don't want to be at a party because it's hard to navigate. All of a sudden you're hearing this conversation over here where you can't hear the ones close. So it's hard to be in a group of a lot of people, which he's comfortable with. He's comfortable being around a lot of good, a lot of people.
Well, and I think that's the difference, that in using the tool is you don't have control over it as much.
Right. Yeah.
It reminded me of like when Superman has his ever hearing everyone in the entire metropolis talking, he can't focus on anyone. Yeah. But with Superman, it's kind of like a thing where and with us as human beings, with a regular hearing, is that we can choose to focus on something, and then we will hear just that one person talking. Whereas with the implant, it was kind of like he can't focus, so he can't really figure it out, and it's maddening to listen to it and to be a part of it, because you just want him to hear what's going on, and I think he's experiencing it for the first time. And part of that is built up by this really great supporting turn from, I'm going to butcher the name, Matthew Amalric.
Yes,
who was Bond villain and everything.
That's what I got confused. He's been in Bond movies, not.
But he played Lou's dad, Richard Berger, and he doesn't get a lot of screen time, but we get that one really great scene between him and Ruben when he's cooking food, making him breakfast. Where he kind of explains, I didn't really like you, and I blamed you in a lot of ways. And it's a really interesting scene, because it doesn't really play like it belongs in the movie when you see it for the first time, but it really feels at home once you kind of see it through to the end and have that scene between Lou and her father, and having him experience this beautiful musical moment and realizing it's not for him.
So yeah, I think I don't know. Do you recommend it?
I would definitely recommend the movie. I didn't put it on my top 10.
It's not a Saturday night feel good
Yeah,
movie.
I didn't put it on my top 10 for last year purely because like I didn't want to watch it again. I was mad, and I still am mad watching the movie because it's a frustrating movie that I think is really well made and it's really good, and I highly recommend it.
No, especially I've directed my film. That cafe, how they shot that from outside to intimate, and it could have been a mess if it wasn't edited right. It could look really bad. But that whole dinner scene of him, they're going to call it maybe a replacement, and he's mad about it, you're going to call it a replacement. Man, that's masterful editing. It's perfect.
Yep. And that part for me just made me mad too, because I was like, hey, I know that it's like 2 a.m. at this cafe, but you gotta lower the language, buddy, okay? Like my inner like management skills from my previous jobs have been like, hey, this is a family place. But anyway.
Yeah, but he plays it out marvelously. I mean, he acts like it's somebody that's been an addict, and he can't sit still, and he's fumbling, and he can't just relax.
Yeah. And that's the search of the whole movie, and I think it's a tremendous recommendation on both of our parts. Yeah. I'm looking forward to jumping back in time to find out if it wins any awards on Oscar night. But I think it's an interesting thing that this is one of the movies that really highlights deaf, hard of hearing as a lifestyle. We've been kind of building towards that over the past couple decades. Films like 2006's Babel, Baby Driver, characters in the Creed movies, like we've had more deaf representation or hard of hearing representation in films. Yeah. This is one of the first times where I felt like I was in the person's body as they were experiencing it.
It feels like that. It has a slight documentary feel to it, but not overly documentary. It does have scenes as you witness it, but great performances by everybody. Yeah, I had to sit and watch it twice too. But yeah, first time seeing it. Once again, I just appreciate the massive amount of, this is really good editing. Yeah. And then the technical terms of talking about sound in a film, because, let's be honest, sound is like 50% of the movie. Yep. I mean, everything could be marvelous, but you get the sound off and it takes you away. But here the sound is emphasized, not only through the music and the score and everything, but how sound can be quiet, and that can be irritating.
Yeah, they get a really fascinating level of like you said, 50% sound in a film. That can be tough when you lose the sound, but the way it's utilized makes that really strong cinematography work with the great editing. And then when you lose the sound pieces, there's almost this sense that you're still hearing something. You're hearing peace. You're hearing it, but like you're not experiencing it the way that he should be, because he isn't either. It's a really fascinating, like lived in movie. I'm
gonna recommend a movie that's kind of the same arc, Lady Macbeth by Florence Pugh. Oh, they use sound. The quiet is her way of antagonizing everybody, and the steps and everything. And there's not really a lot of music in it, but she's in a forced relationship, and she's gonna use quiet as a weapon to get back at everybody without speaking. Without very much moving, but it's sitting still, and I'm going to wait to get after you. So I recommend, if you like the technical terms of how we use sound in film, with not using a lot of explosions and everything, I recommend Lady Macbeth, or try Blowout too.
Yeah, Blowout. There's a recent film, Land, from Robin Wright, that was heavily like one person by themselves. There's that All Is Lost film with Robert Redford, where he plays a guy on a boat facing a storm, and like there's no dialogue for most of the movie. Like there's some interesting lack of dialogue movies. I don't think all of them work. I'm not a big fan of the All Is Lost movie. I think it's gorgeously shot. I find it unnerving because you spend so much time there. But there's a lot of films now that are embracing that silence piece. Yeah. Even A Quiet Place. And its upcoming sequel that
where sound can
talk about.
Where quiet can be horrific. Yeah. But you also have to be comfortable in it.
Yeah, exactly. So we definitely both recommend this movie, and we want to know what you think. The film is available. It's an Amazon original, so you can find it on Prime pretty much at any point. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Don't forget, too, you can also like this video, which helps us out so much, and subscribe, too, so you can get our 2 new episodes every single week when they drop. We know you want to see them. We will love filming them. You can also check out the Patreon.
Do it.
Patreon.com/KyleNickOnFilm. Don't forget, too, that link is down in the description in case you didn't hear me say it the first time. But you can check out all the different ways you can help submit to our themes for the months, for our additional movies, or just get the conversation going there, too. I love it, interacting with the patrons and stuff that we have on there, and we're looking forward to adding more.
Yeah. Well, thanks for watching. I'm Nick from the Sequel Filmcast.
I'm Kyle Goethe. You can find all my film reviews on GoFilmReviews.com. Let's rock on out of here.
Yeah, well, I only got my one.
You got the one!